Start when we become quorate.
That would help.
Neil Shane is definitely here because he's.
Right, are we ready to go on live stream?
We're ready for.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to welcome members to this meeting of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, and also welcome members of the public who or media who have joined us today, either here or online. And the Combined Authority allows filming and photography at its meeting, so if you want to, feel free to take pictures or tweet. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate? And I'd remind members and officers that the meeting is being recorded. I'm chairing this meeting as Deputy Mayor and standing in for Nick Johnson. Nick is in Papworth, and we wish him the best for an operation he's having today. He did text me late last night because I'd asked after him, and he's being well looked after, and he thanks a whole range of people for their kind messages, and he's looking forward to catching up with us. And obviously he's taken a major interest in transport and in bus services, so we'll follow up on that work. So in terms of members here, I see that Martin Smart is standing in for Katie Thornborough. Katie Thornborough sadly has had a family bereavement, and I think we're all here apart from Marcus Oresti, who we hope will be able to join us. I think that covers apologies, item 1.1. 1.2, does any member wish to declare a pecuniary disclosable or non-statutory disclosable interest today? No? Okay, thank you. I wasn't present at the last meeting, so I'm relying on others to confirm, but I've got the minutes here of the meeting of the 13th of July. We're being asked, and I'm asking you, to confirm these as an accurate record. Is there any member wants to raise any issue of accuracy on these minutes? Are you happy that I sign the minutes? Okay, thank you, which I will do. Item 1.4, the Combined Authority Forward Plan. Any comments from committee members on the forward plan? Nope. We'll move on. 1.5, we've got two public questions. The Ely Cycling Campaign, I don't think are here, but I see Paul Hollinghurst, who's asked the second question. So if I just ask the committee officer to read out the question on number 1.
Thank you, Chair. The first question comes from the Ely Cycling Campaign. The combined authority wrote to both Ely Cycling Campaign and Smarter Cambridge Transport about sustainable, integrated and active travel in letters both dated the 30th of September 2021. These letters mentioned that the authority would be looking to advertise for an active travel czar in the near future. Further announcements about recruitment were promised for the near future. The same letters mentioned that there were proposals to bring together interested parties within an active travel forum. Please would the authority provide an update to the progress made in appointing an active travel czar and also inaugurating an active travel forum.
Thank you, and thank you to the Ely Cycling Campaign for your question. The Combined Authority is committed to developing an active travel advocate, the name we'll use rather than czar, and an active travel lead to bring together interested parties in a new active travel forum. The Combined Authority were recently invited to apply for over £800,000 of national funding called Capability and Ambition Funding, being led by the new Active Travel England organisation. If successful, this will enable us to further progress the role of the advocate and lead alongside developing projects and training and getting input from many organisations, including yours. The Combined Authority is also trying to identify funds within its own budgets to ensure that these roles can continue beyond the period of the Capability and Ambition funding. And we await with hope and ambition the outcome of the bid that we've put into Active Travel England. So thank you for that question. Question 2, Paul Hollinghurst, if you want to just come to the mic and ask your question.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nick Dibben from Rail Future on behalf of Paul Hollinghurst, who can't be here this morning. So my question relates to tram train. The question is, Network Rail's light rail team concluded in their Wisbech to March potential for light rail report that's part of this meeting that a tram train solution appeared the best credible light rail option for the reopening, and rates highly in a comparative analysis with other rail-based options. In another part of Cambridgeshire, the railway line to Haverhill was also assessed by Network Rail's light rail team as part of the Department for Transport's Restoring Your Railway Fund bid, which was rated as a good cause for future development, about which they commented that this proposal has potential as a tram train scheme, and a light rail solution would reduce capital infrastructure costs for the reinstatement to Haverhill. The development of a tram train fleet in this area could also tie in with other opportunities such as Wisbech. So the question is, does the Combined Authority see the potential of Network Rail's light rail team's stated view that tram train is not only appropriate for the Wisbech reopening, but also for the Haverhill reopening? And will the Combined Authority work with Network Rail's light rail team to evaluate tram train in the Cambridgeshire area, covering both these reopening schemes and including services through to Cambridge on existing rail routes where paths are available? Such a study can be done irrespective of whatever decision is taken about the next step for the Wisbech reopening. Thank you.
Thank you for your question from Rail Future East Anglia. The issue before us today is the Wisbech rail, and we have no stated preference currently about whether that's light rail or heavy rail. In terms of the Wisbech scheme, the paper provides options for the reopening of the line, including this proposal in the options assessment report to consider both heavy and light rail, and also to undertake an economic analysis on the preferred mode option. On the Haverhill project, essentially the additionality that the combined authority provides leaves that decision and those options primarily to the Greater Cambridge Partnership, in that they were also awarded up to £500 million for transport within that area. So our focus is on the Wisbech project. So given that the government has not announced also the future of the Ely area rail capacity enhancements, there's also a challenge there. So the focus is on the Wisbech to March service in terms of the combined authority, and the option assessment report is to be undertaken, including work by Network Rail, given that they've got a light rail team as well as obviously heavy rail experience. So at this stage, the combined authority's got no view on either heavy or light rail for the Wisbech, and we can't preempt as this committee the outcome of that work. So really, we've got to wait until we complete that options assessment report before we can see. And of course, we're concerned about transport to and from Haverhill, and if there are ways that we can assist and input into the work that the GCP is doing, then we will. Thank you. And thanks for coming. We also had a third question, which arrived after our main deadline. I don't think Verity Stowe is here. So her question related to the 18 bus, which has recently been replaced by Whippet, which is a bus that works a route out from Cambridge to villages in South Cambridgeshire. So the question she asked was, since the 18 bus has been replaced by Whippet, every day essential service times are being cancelled. What is the board going to do to fix this, as the public are left stranded? So the officers have been in touch with Whippet, and we actually had an exchange which resulted in adding back a couple of services into their schedule. But a fuller answer we'll send to Verity and make available publicly so that other users of that essential 18 bus service can see. It's quite clear that some of the problems that particularly Stagecoach have been suffering in terms of driver numbers are also being experienced by Whippet. And we are talking to them, and I actually met Stagecoach a week ago Monday, each of the bus operators are making efforts to recruit more drivers, and that's essential because we can't actually operate a decent bus network if the level of cancellations that we've been suffering recently continues. So thank you to those three public questioners. I then move on to item 2.1. I mean, we've got quite a bit of time today. So item 2.1 is on A16 Norwood Duelling, and I would ask Anna Graham, Transport Programme Manager, to introduce that report. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. This paper seeks approval for the outline business case and a decision on the next steps for the A16 Norwood project. The paper provides two options, either to draw down funding and progress the full business case, or defer the approval to the start of the full business case until funding for the construction phase has been identified. The A16 improvement scheme continues to demonstrate high value for money. The outline business case demonstrates a BCR of 2.9, whilst also having significant strategic value by supporting local growth and, critically, the construction of at least 2,000 homes in the Norwood growth side. The current medium-term financial plan has 12.4 million subject to approval, of which 1.2 million is being requested, if agreed, for the drawdown of the development of the full business case. The subject to approval funding is based on Transforming Cities funding allocation. As will be outlined in a later paper, there are ongoing discussions in place with the Department for Transport around the management of the TCF fund and deliverability within the necessary timescales. It has been agreed with Peterborough City Council that the A16 Norwood cannot be constructed within the TCF timescales, and therefore the construction will not be funded through this funding stream. The package of interventions remain broadly similar to those identified in the strategic outline business case stage. One change being the closure of the Newborough Road. It's proposed that the access onto the A47 will be closed rather than the junction being fully closed at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Do any members of the committee have a question to ask Anna? Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Anna, it was just one question around the risk-adjusted base cost, or the outturn cost, 12.9. I know this is a very difficult question in these circumstances. How confident are we about that figure?
It uses the latest information from, I think, the Engineering Council, so to try and adjust inflation and to put that as we can, but obviously we will have to continue to keep an eye on that. So we've done the best we can with the information that we have. Okay.
Any other questions? No? I welcome Councillor Seresti. So we've got in front of us on page 65 a combination of recommendations, and with the core one being B, which proposes this further funding to progress the project, with the alternate effectively being C. In the interesting way, compared to other committees, that the Transport Committee structures the votes. A and if we got to C are a simple majority. B requires not just the 2/3 majority, but the votes of both Cambridge City and Peterborough to support them. So I propose to take A first and then B, and then if B is supported, that negates C. So all those in favour of approving the outline business case? That's unanimous. And all those in favour of recommending to the Combined Authority Board at its meeting on the 30th, this 1.2 million drawdown, that is item B. Okay, thank you for that. I move on to item 2.2, which you're also introducing, Anna, Wisbech Rail.
Thank you very much. The paper seeks a decision on the next steps for Wisbech Rail, either to promote and lobby for heavy rail, recognising the potential delivery of Wisbech to Cambridge timeframe is linked to the delivery of the Ely area capacity enhancements, or undertaking an options assessment report to provide the economic analysis on mode options, including the existing information on heavy rail, based on a service operating between Wisbech and March. Network Rail's review concluded that there was a strong strategic focus within the 2020 business case, which supported the need for public transport links from Wisbech. Significantly, however, Network Rail recommended removing assumptions about Ely area capacity enhancements. In their view, all costs required for Wisbech to Cambridge should be part of the business case as a standalone project. It was also assumed that one train path may be available at Ely North Junction, and a further train path could be sought through Ely area capacity enhancement. Network Rail's work has shown that there is currently no capacity at Ely, and securing future train paths is highly competitive, and there's no guarantee that we would be successful. Additionally, government have not announced the next steps for Ely area capacity enhancements at this time. In addition to the review of the existing work that the Combined Authority had undertaken, Network Rail also produced a high-level feasibility study for the potential for light rail. This was produced following engagement with DFT and ORR, whose view was that further options needed to be considered. The report concluded that there is potential for a light rail passenger operation between March and Wisbech, highlighting tram train or very light rail could be used. But that's led to the two options available on the paper, and I commend the report to the committee.
Thank you, Anna. I'll take any questions if there are any. Councillor Seaton.
Got it. Thank
Ironically, you pressed the no button.
Probably, yes. Yeah, I did, yes. Thank you. A couple of points on this. I think, as you mentioned earlier in your response to a question, we don't need to preempt whether it might be light rail or heavy rail, and I would like to see both those options kept open. Obviously, there is great concern over the Ely Junction and what inference that has on whether Wisbech March Rail is a going concern or not. Now, I know that there may be other things going on in the background that we're not aware of, but there was a recent letter, I believe, from Grant Shapps saying that, or inferring that the likelihood of Ely Junction happening was slowly disappearing into the future. I hope that may change, and we may have other information that I'm not aware of at the moment. As far as the paper goes, then I'd be very much pushing for recommendations B and then followed by C, because I think we need to be seeing to putting together a proper presentation on the requirements for Wisbech March Rail. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Seaton. Anna, Tim, do we have any more information about the Ely capacity, because that is critical to the rail network?
I may ask Tim as Head of Transport.
Quite timely, yesterday I was in the House of Commons in Parliament for a discussion on the rail priority for Transport East, which is the national transport body for the East of England. Technically, we are in the England National Heartland, but they are suggesting from their point of view that actually the higher priority of a rail scheme for their rail plan is the Ely area capacity, along with Hawley Junction in Suffolk. At that meeting, there was a number of MPs. There was MPs who were in charge of the task force for various routes. Also, there was the MP for Great Yarmouth, who is the co-chair of the parliamentary group for East of England. And they suggested that actually we need to continue to push forward on Ely area capacity because it got agreement and support from a lot of MPs across the House and across the geography of the UK. And so an event was going to be held early in the new year with MPs to lobby DfT ministers around Ely area capacity, because they believe from their perspective, but also across the board, that actually it is one of the highest priorities for the country. And this was also endorsed by senior officers from Great British Rail and also Network Rail yesterday. So there was, I know that's a lobbying piece, but actually, and there's no decision made, but it was all good news coming out of House of Parliament yesterday. But we await more information from from the new Minister, Mark Harper.
Okay, Councillor Bovingdon, and then Councillor Wakeford.
Thanks, Tim. And that actually sounds a little bit more encouraging than perhaps a few days ago. Just going back to the Wisbech, and again, a question of Tim really. If we were to go for option B, would that have any negative impact on the Ely area?
So I think if we go down the route of the option appraisal, I think that actually that'd be a positive way forward from my perspective. That'd be my recommendation, because you need to look at all the options, and actually it would be more likely to be view positively going forward, because ultimately when we get to the appraisal stage, they'll go, what other options have you assessed? So if we go through the process and assess all of those, I think that's the right way forward for the scheme in general. And regards Ely area capacity, I don't think going for an option appraisal report will be adversely impact on Ely area capacity. I think that Ely area capacity standalone, as I just said, I think it's a national priority, and it's done its own 2 feet as a priority.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford and then Councillor Shaler.
Thank you. Just in light of Tim's update, I was going to ask Councillor Seaton if that new information meant that there would be any different view you'd take and share with us in light of what you said earlier. But I think Tim's steer was still on the value of the options appraisal there, as opposed to that entailing the logic of helpful leather on A specifically. So I'm imagining your comments might stand, but by all means clarify.
Thank you for that. Councillor Shaler.
Well, the last one, of course. Thank you, Chair. The paper, which was quite long, that we saw the different options, but it omits quite a few of the future possibilities, and I hate to call it heavy rail, I call it proper rail. The fact that you can use existing rolling stock, that it has a lot of advantages. The paper leans heavily on the Ely area capacity, which is key to a lot of other things, but it doesn't talk too much about the new university, which means that there's a possibility that trains also may be used by Wisbech residents to go via March, not necessarily to Cambridge. So this is really about connecting Wisbech. And I think that's about freight, it's about future expansion, and the idea, in a way, that there's an argument that we either do all or nothing, I think is a bit of a red herring. So I think from our point of view, we would support heavy rail options, and if it means that we continue with that development regardless of the Ely area, and in some ways that might even enhance the business case for the Ely area expansion. And of course we can't second judge what's going on in central government at the moment, but I would be absolutely in support of continuing with a heavy rail option. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Seaton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's really why I'm want to go forward with this options assessment report, because I think we need to have something ready in case things change within government, specifically with Ely Junction. We don't want to be on the back foot if all of a sudden things start to happen there and we've not got a oven-ready case to go forward with the Wisbech March Rail. So, I agree with Councillor Shaler that heavy rail should not be taken off the agenda on this. I think we need to look at all options, and I know from a Wisbech point of view, there is certainly from members in the Wisbech area, there is a preference to have a heavy rail option included. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Smart. Thank you, Councillor Seaton.
So, through you, Chair, I mean, Tim said he was in Parliament recently. Is there any concern about committing 80,000 of our money before the autumn statement in terms of infrastructure spending by government? Is that going to be an issue in terms of what we can do going forward?
Any comment, Anna or Tim?
I
presume you don't know what's coming.
No. I think there's 2 points. Firstly, going back on Councillor Seaton's previous point around heavy rail. So heavy rail will be one of those options. So therefore, I think that you cover off both. You also have heavy rail, but you also have the other option. So I think that I'd say that would be my strong recommendation to go down that route. With regards the autumn statement tomorrow, I think we're all waiting bated breath to see what impact that has on our budgets. But at the moment, this is budgeted for within our own transport budget. So the money is available to draw down, and I don't think this autumn statement tomorrow will adversely impact on that particular budget. There may be one later on in the agenda that we may have an impact on that we'll discuss on the Transforming City Fund. But actually on this one, I think the budget is available and we can progress going forward.
Okay. Councillor MacDonald.
Just a quick question, Chair, to Anna. I noticed that, Anna, the Network Rail document was valid until 6th of October. Presumably that can just be rolled forward.
Yes.
So it doesn't effectively expire?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Still remains the same.
Good news. Councillor Shaler and then Councillor Wakeford.
Just a quick addition to that, we've currently just recently finished the Kings Dyke project, and part of the business case for that was increasing the capacity on that March-Peterborough route. So again, the more capacity we get on the periphery, it again, I think, adds to the pressure to do the Ely area project. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think Councillor Schaller earlier made a compelling point around interoperability with wider connections. Obviously, that is a core part of a conventional or heavy rail service. I mean, I was looking in the papers, reflecting on figure 29 is the RAG comparative assessments of the different options on various factors. So this is page 407 in the pack, and perhaps an obvious point, but of the several lines there, of which there are certainly more greens shown for things that aren't conventional heavy rail than for it. One of those lines is that point about ability to operate on the main line, and these are not, don't strike me as necessarily equally significant factors, and for me the weighting of that should surely be considered very, very heavily in the business case. But as colleagues have identified, the heavy rail option is by no means precluded by looking at the options as well. So I'm content to defer to colleagues on this one.
Thank you. So overall, the committee wants to keep the options open and would prefer heavy rail, but it is an issue of cost as well. So it isn't just that diagram that you pointed out rightly of that assessment, because there are wider factors in making the choice. Clearly, if we can get Ely as an early decision, then that will free up the easier priority for this edition. It's been a project for the Combined Authority since its inception 5 years ago, so it's one that, along with Fenland Council, as Chris Seaton has said, it's something that we really are committed to. So we await with interest what the decisions are tomorrow on rail. Rail still has a huge part to play for the future, including in shifting people out of cars and helping protect the planet. So we've got two different versions of voting. We've got a simple majority vote on A and B, and then it goes back to the formula I mentioned in the previous item. So if I can take A and B together, can I see all those in favour? Thank you. And C, which is to draw down £80,000 for some of the further options assessment work. All those in favour? Thank you. Well, with this spirit, we might get through the rest of the agenda. 2.3, please. So we've got a change from Anna, and welcome Robert Jones, who's going to introduce the report on another rail study, Snailwell Loop, between Soham and Newmarket.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Transport Infrastructure Committee members. This morning's paper I'm presenting is about Snailwell Loop. The three considerations to the committee are: A, to recommend to the board a pause in the works in Snailwell Loop for a period of 6 months whilst there's ongoing uncertainty about the Ely area capacity, which has already been mentioned a number of times already, and slip the existing budget funding for this into the financial year 23-24. Or B, recommend the Combined Authority approve £150,000 of the current budgeted £500,000 subject to approval to enable continued development work and slip the balance into the financial year 23-24. Or C, continue with the work on the local regional partners to urge the government to support the EA scheme or Ely area capacity. So the Combined Authority are looking to enhance the rail network and to improve and offer national, regional and local businesses, as well as enhancing the connectivity from and to our communities. The potential improvements include Ely area capacity, known as EACE, and the Snailwell Loop schemes. These will enable more frequent services and make journeys quicker for passengers, whilst improving potential for greater and more efficient freight movements to, from and through our region. East Cambridgeshire, and particularly Ely, is well served by the rail network, and with direct services Kings Lynn, Cambridge, London, Norwich, Stansted Airport, Peterborough, and the Midlands and the North West. However, some services, particularly to Kings Lynn, Cambridge North, and the Cambridge-London corridor, especially during peak times, suffer from severe overcrowding. Whilst other services, such as those to Ipswich, are too infrequent to hourly, they do not offer a genuine, realistic and attractive options as many. In addition, the complex junctions north of Ely act as a key constraint on the capacity and make it difficult to run additional train services for both passengers and freight. In order to truly realise the full potential of Soham Station double tracking, so that's the second stage of the newly opened railway station, the provision of Snailwell Loop is necessary to allow for hourly direct services for the community. The Ely area capacity scheme would facilitate additional rail services to Cambridge, as well as additional services to Peterborough, Ipswich and Norwich. The Combined Authority continue to work with Network Rail to deliver additional capacity through the Ely area for the benefit of passenger and freight services, whilst protecting the quality of life of residents in Queen Adelaide. The Ely area capacity project will help to deliver additional rail services, including to Cambridge, Kings Lynn, Peterborough and Ipswich, and provide the capacity for any future services to Wisbech. The scheme should ensure more reliable journeys for all passengers, whilst providing additional capacity for freight services between Felixstowe and Nuneaton, hence reducing the need for freight to be transported by heavy goods vehicles along the A14. All right, sorry. I think the focus really is section 2.4. Basic principle of Snailwell Loop is it relies heavily on Ely area capacity, I think is the fundamental point.
And Soham ward member, so. Yes. Tell us a bit about Snailwell. Snailwell's a nice little village, which I think is where our MP Lucy Fraser lives as well. Obviously, one of the key benefits to Soham railway station is its links into Ely at the moment, but one of the fundamentals is to be able to get people into Cambridge, particularly for educational facilities. And the Snailwell Loop has always been part of the wider proposals for Soham railway station. Whilst I appreciate that the Snailwell Loop is tied in with Ely area, it is, I understand from Network Rail, possible to be able to proceed with the Snailwell Loop independently, but will rely upon it. Therefore, my proposal will be very much to support B and C on here, and with the better news that Tim came out with regarding government support of EAC for the future, hopefully we can get it all done together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bovingdon. Any other contributions? No? Councillor Shaler.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that, again, we're talking about dependent on government questions. It seems to be we're in the same position as the previous question to many extents. From a Cambridge point of view, everything that helps the local area transport communication, I would be tending to support. In terms of East Cams connection, again, it's the same sort of answers that I would give for Wisbech. I can't see a downside to this, actually. But we await on the government.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Just to make a general point, I mean, I suppose as Cambridge councillors, we tend to think about Cambridge, but in this context of transport, Snailwell, Cambridge, getting to schools and colleges and so on, it's all about getting from A to B, and A and B are in two different places. They're not about Cambridge or about anywhere else in the local region. It's about where you're going from and to. And so we all need to work together to get these transport routes done.
Yeah, and all of the rail network east of Soham or east of Cambridge is weak. I mean, we've got single tracks, we've got inadequate long-term investment for 50 years. So effectively, the recommendations commit the combined authority to continuing to progress the work, but there's a timing issue of holding on to the funding and combining it in 23-24. So that's effectively what we'll be voting for. So if I can move to the vote, I haven't been asking for movers and seconders, but I hope that's all right with people. It's pretty clear. So first of all, if I just take recommendations A and B, they require a 2/3 vote. All those in favour of A and B? Unanimous. And C, which is to continue the work with regional partners to get support for the Ely scheme, of which Tim Bellamy evidenced that we've got support right across the east, and clearly working with Norfolk and Suffolk together, that makes us much more effective. So thank you for that, Robert. Right, we move on to a more sort of all-encompassing 2.4 and the report on the bus strategy, which will also underpin some decisions about bus funding, which are coming to the Combined Authority Board on the 30th. If I can ask Tim Bellamy to introduce this report, Interim Head of Transport for the Combined Authority.
Thank you, Councillor Herbert. Thank you, members. I'm here to gather your feedback on the draft bus strategy, any amendments and changes that members and constituent council officers wish to see taken on board ahead of a consultation draft being put towards the board later in the month to allow for a 6-week consultation. These will be reported through the board in a summary paper. We have already received some feedback from members and officers alike, with particularly around more emphasis to be on providing access to key destinations, including education, retail, leisure opportunity and healthcare, thereby providing social equality. At the moment, the feedback also receives a lot of focus on economic growth, and more can be made around access to these educational establishments. In addition, further detail is needed around the importance of the environment and how buses will play a key role in that. In addition, there is a need to tighten up some of the language and some of the ambiguity within the paper as well, and in the strategy need to be removed, so some of that needs to be developed over the next few days. In addition, the Combined Authority needs to submit a bus service improvement plan that aligns to this bus strategy, thereby ensuring a golden thread between the emerging local transport and connectivity plan, the bus strategy and how we're going to deliver our improvements. We've been granted an extension to the BSIP submission date by DfT to ensure that this alignment with our emerging bus strategy, and it's due to be submitted to government as a draft, which will then be subsequently consulted with our bus operators. Therefore, the third recommendation to allow the delegate responsibility to myself and the chair of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer, to submit a final BSIP to central government in a timely manner. If members have comments following this meeting on the bus strategy that don't necessarily come here or come to light in due course, the transport team are obviously more than willing to receive these. In addition, an informal, optional, non-decision-making meeting with the transport team has been organised for later in the month with Transport and Infrastructure Committee members and lead members ahead of the board to allow for further comment and amendment to be understood and actioned accordingly. I commend the paper to the committee.
Thanks. So what you're saying is there's going to be a further discussion which will inform. So it's important that if there are views from this committee, we get them shared, and that way they can then be incorporated so that the board's got your views as well as what's in the strategy. So it particularly hinges on recommendation A, where we're seeking the opportunity to give greater time to this today. So anyone want to start with thoughts on the bus strategy? Councillor MacDonald.
So just to kick off the discussion, Chair, so I hope we can look forward to something quite ambitious. I know that's easy to say and more difficult to deliver. What do I mean by more ambitious? So I think that getting this right for the combined authority and all the individual councils is absolutely essential for all sorts of reasons that are laid out in the report. 2 points I wanted to make, which is let's ensure that the interconnectivity is there with rail, with travel hubs, with other means of getting from A to B, rather than just looking too much at an individual bus strategy. And that's what I mean by being ambitious. Second thing I wanted to say is that, we've sat in here in the combined authority and talked about skills and skill development. And I think the bus strategy, well, public transport strategy more generally, and bus strategy in particular, has the opportunity to support that work and enabling students or those in adult education, again, to get from A to B in a relatively low-cost way. So when it comes back to us, I'd like to see some of that ambition on the bus strategy overall. I'm happy to support the work, but want it to, take much more of a deep dive into not just what's the status quo, but what's the real opportunities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford and then Councillor Bobbington.
Thank you. Likewise, I'm entirely content and supportive of progressing with a bus strategy document. This is really, really important to our residents. There are various things one could say, but I think the level of ambition is good. I think it's probably fair to say that there would be value in greater detail around the kind of how questions, albeit at a strategic level of delivering. But just on that ambition, the draft vision is quoted in paragraph 2.13 as a comprehensive network of bus services across Cambs and Peterborough that people find convenient, easy to use, reliable, and good value for money, that's inclusive and offers a viable alternative to the car. And who could disagree with that, I suspect. But in terms of what we understand by comprehensive, there might be different definitions. It strikes me a reasonable working one, given the critical importance of predictability in the existence of routes for people to be able to plan their lives around where they live, particularly in more rural areas, of which we have a particular proportion in Huntingdonshire. For me, as I say, a kind of immediate working definition of comprehensive might be a network that covers all of the areas, the towns and villages that were served by buses up until the stagecoach news in recent weeks, albeit with the interim solutions there as well. But as I say, for me, a comprehensive network surely has to include services reaching places that have to date enjoyed and received and been able to make use of services. That is in no sense an objection to the service of more communities, of course, but as a baseline. And just again in that draft vision, convenient, easy to use, reliable, good value for money, those are all excellent, but again, a definition of convenience for me is about providing the routes that people actually need, as opposed to the existence of routes. Having the ability to get on a bus is great, but then also it's to take you to the right place, which may seem so obvious a point it's not sort of spelt out in the strategy. But so for me, that's sort of what comprehensive should be and what convenience should be. If I may, on a point of detail as well, on a I guess a separate point, 18 and 19 discuss franchising and the combined authority position on that with a bit of commentary. I just wonder if there's a clear, publicly facing place that how we've done that assessment of the value of franchising has been set out, along with the conclusions clearly as a, dare I say, a sort of a if not an idiot's guide, a guide that would be of use to some of us who are newer to these conversations, as well as our wider publics.
Thank you. There's some important points there. Councillor Bovingdon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I concur with some of those points. I think generic is a word I would use, and I'd like to see a lot more detail in here, particularly on some areas such as, this integration of travel, which is on page 518. However, East Cambridgeshire's District Council's biggest issue is that this plan implies that road charging will be going ahead, which we cannot support. And therefore I won't be able to support this going forward purely because of that one point that's in there. There's a lot of good work in here. I think it needs a lot more detail, but if we're going to be including congestion charging, unfortunately, we cannot support that.
Okay. Councillor Sereste and then Councillor Seaton.
Is that right? It's not switching on.
No button.
Then, yeah, it's on now, right? Okay. I have to agree with a lot of the things that Councillor Wakeford said. I'm not a bus user. The reason I don't use the buses is because I don't find them convenient. But I am a rail user, and I use the rail service because it's very convenient. It gets me from A to B, to where I want to go in the quickest and shortest way, and so I use it. And I think that's the big problem with buses. There's a lot of people who don't have a choice, which is fair enough, and they use buses. But if I would have thought that what we want to do too is to attract far more people to use bus routes. So, there's one bus route that runs through my city. I don't know where. Quite frankly, it's a visitor's tour rather than a bus route. It takes so long to get from A to B. I think that's one of the things we've really got to be careful about. Quite rightly, the buses need to be comfortable and clean, and where they have staff, the staff need to be courteous and understand what's going on. I think the other thing that I think, especially if we get into franchising, we need to make absolutely certain that the public, all of the public, not just those of us who are relatively IT literate, I'm still walking the earth with the dinosaurs, but that if I want something done, I give it to my 10-year-old. But there are lots of people who can't even do that. And so we need to somehow make it possible for everybody to understand what's going on, because there's no point in having buses if people don't know where they run, how they find them, and where they're going to. So, some simple things like that, sometimes we just forget. We get into the complicated, difficult stuff, but we've got to make sure that the public understand what it is that's available and how to access it. So, my view is we need buses, but one of the objectives should be to get people like me onto buses, because the benefit is not just that then there's more buses available and it makes it better for everybody, but it's also we're helping the climate, the planet and the world, because you're getting my damn big car off the road. So, I think there's a double win there if we can achieve it.
Thank you. Councillor Seaton, then Councillor Shaler.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to agree with what Councillor Bovington said earlier, that the inference of congestion charging across the whole of the area is something that there's no way that I could support. One size doesn't fit all. We have quite large urban areas, and we have some very rural areas. And I'm not sure that this paper actually recognises all that. It says in the paper that the text follows working with constituent authorities, other partners and bus operators. Well, my officers have had no input into this document, which I find extraordinary. And they did not know some of the detail in here until they saw the paper. And I've asked them to go through this quite in detail, because some of the areas that I was not aware of either. You know, we talked about earlier, someone mentioned about skills and getting people into skills. Well, one of the bus routes that there isn't no longer there, which is, I know, not the Combined Authority, it was down to the bus supplier, was the route from March to Chatteris. And there is opened in Chatteris a new apprenticeship building for metalcraft there. And there's no way for people other than by car to get to Chatteris. So, you know, the whole thing, I think, and I'm really pleased that it was said earlier that we would be having another discussion about this, because quite honestly, I think some of the wording in this document is open to interpretation. And I think we need a lot more clarity. And, you know, I think it's been said earlier, and I think I've said this before, that, you know, in Finland being very rural, you know, we are not going to be able to get rid of the car. It's not going to suddenly disappear because we don't have the services. We've talked about Wisbech Rail. You know, the bus services are virtually, apart from Kings Lynn through to Peterborough, are non-existent at the moment. You know, and there are no hubs as such apart from just Wisbech, and then limited bus services from there. So, you know, I think, you know, we're going to have more input into this, that we have another chance to see this paper with a lot more clarity involved, and, you know, because at the moment, I'm not able to support this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Tim Bellamy, do you want to come back on two parts there? A, the engagement that you're proposing before the board meeting on the 30th, and B, this issue of where the combined authority sits in relation to the GCP consultation? Because I can't see any specific reference. I don't know, Councillor Bovingdon or Seaton, if you could just reference the phrase that you don't like in it about the potential if the consultation endorses a proposal for the Cambridge area. There's certainly no proposal for broader congestion charging. There's nothing being led by the combined authority.
Yeah. So just on that point in particular, there's nothing from the combined authority around the congestion charging element, and GCP are going through their consultation, and we wouldn't be in a position to comment on that. That's for GCP to develop their consultation, and off the back of that, we'll see where we are with the following public consultation. Then we'll work with them going forward. But the language itself, if you can point to whereabouts it is, as Councillor Herbert says, we can tighten that language up, because we don't want the ambiguity to actually come in the way of actually what we're all trying to achieve and how we achieve this going forward. So we can tighten that language up, and we can do that offline as well going forward. In relation to the engagement, though, I will be taking the comment that you've all made here. I'll be working with the team to update just based on those, but in the meantime, any other comments can come forward. And there'll be with both officers, but also members as well, with a chance to comment. And then there is a meeting scheduled for the 24th of November with Transport Infrastructure Committee members and lead officer leaders as well, to go through a final draft before we go to board. That document, but there will be a document that will go to board at the end of this week, and we're mindful that things may change going forward.
And presumably, if Councillor Seaton wanted to bring his chief executive or a district officer, they're welcome at the 24th. And also, sorry, on added to that is me and the team can organise. We can have one-to-one as well with I can do with your tech officer or the chief exec. We can do that. When that's an offer to any constituent councils as we're going forward. Councillor Shaler.
Thank you, Chair. I start with a short comment, but it's not about getting rid of the car. I think it's about providing options and actually increasing capacities. So I think that's a little bit of a red herring. I want to read, this is an anecdote that we had last night from one of the county councillors. I had a call from one of my parish councillors today. A 79-year-old vulnerable lady spent between 5 and 7:30 waiting for a bus at Royston to take her back to Harston. Bus never turned up. She called the police asking for help. They said nothing they could do. She ended up spending the night in a public toilet. Now, these are about actual people, actual lives, even though we are looking at this from a higher, a more of an overall strategy. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the beneficiaries of people on buses are not only those people on the buses, but it's provision of infrastructure, and we want to create an environment where our people can thrive. And in order to get them to work, we need something ambitious. I think we need a joined up system with education transport. On the county council, we spend an enormous amount of money getting people from more rural transport deprived locations to get them to school. And if we can join it up with on-demand services, somewhere where you can get a ticket that takes you across several different services. This happens in other parts of the country, and I would like to see more information about the way that the Combined Authority will integrate with GCP City Access. And I think all of these aspects are so that we have ambitious, something that is joined up, something that goes past those thresholds. And I think this is especially important when we go to the government for funding. We need something absolutely credible. And I don't think there's a problem in going for something more than perhaps the minimum that we often see. Clearly, it's key to get that government funding, and we need to put in place whatever we can to get that done in a timely fashion. And the government is a bit chaotic, and quite often they will come up at the last minute and want something that's already oven ready. So I think we should be aware of that. I want to also mention the franchising. I think it's absolutely key. We have the option of franchising now. This will give us huge options and control and a way of making our network work for us, for our people, and not just for a more narrow profit for a particular company. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Seaton, and I'll add a couple of comments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the remark that Councillor Shaler made. That I was not suggesting that this paper was trying to get rid of the car. It's much easier to restrict car use within the large urban areas than it is in the rural areas. What I'm suggesting is that there has to be an integration between all the various forms of transport, and that has to include the car for the rural areas. I'm sorry, you can't get rid of the car in the rural areas unless you have such a comprehensive social services that would make having a car seem not possible. So that was the point I was making, not that this paper was suggesting that the car was being taken away from everybody.
Councillor Wakeford. Thank you, Councillor Seaton.
Thank you. On a similar point, and again, speaking for a district with significant rural components, I completely agree. It's not possible to get rid of the car, but I think, and clearly, there's no strategy in the short term. We could dream up however ambitious it was that would deliver that, but I think there is a realistic aspiration around reducing car use and enabling the sort of connectivity, the linking up, so that the car journey you need is the least, so that you're not driving the entire distance from, as it might be, fringes of Huntingdonshire into Cambridge. But so I think I agree completely, and suspect we are violently agreeing on this point that you can't remove private cars, but the ambition of reducing their use is absolutely rational and desirable in this document.
Thanks. I'll just Councillor Smart, and then I'll aim to sum up some of the areas where we've got agreement, because we've been asked and Councillor Seresti after Councillor Smart, because we're basically asked in A to just add our priorities. Councillor Smart and then Councillor Seresti.
Thanks, Chair. So, obviously I'm new to this committee, listening to what's being said before I decide which way to vote. So, interesting to hear different comments around the table. I've got a few points I think I could usefully make in no particular order. So 6 weeks, I don't know if that's long enough for a consultation. I don't know when I couldn't find it in the document where that consultation is going to happen in the year, but we need to make sure we give people enough time on a very important consultation like this to be able to put their point of view, because sometimes people just don't find out about things. Just to give a short story, during the whole Brexit debate, there were residents in my ward in King's Hedges that never even heard of Brexit. They didn't know that we were going to leave the European Union. It wasn't a thing that they heard about, and they find out about things often, people in these communities, by talking to other people in their community, and that can take time to get through. So next point is the strategy itself. So just a few words I've noted down that I feel it should be, and thinking about other places in the country that have failing bus services and failing links between organisations like this one, the Combined Authority, and the providers and so on, that it needs to be sustainable. It needs to be something that's going to go forward and operate for many, many, many years, not just for now. It needs to be flexible, it needs to be adaptable, it needs to be integrated so that we can have all sorts of services. What's a bus? A bus could be any number of things, big and small. And different providers, they all need to work together, because it's the residents that matter, not the bus companies. So we need to have services that work for residents, and the sort of classic things: you buy one ticket and you get somewhere, regardless of what sort of operators you might use along the way. They need to be good quality, attractive. They need to be efficient, fast, and frequent. All of those things are important. When we go to big cities in Europe that have efficient public transport services, they're a joy to use. I really love travelling. I think there is an aspect of travel which is meant to make people feel good, and that should be what we aim for. Next point. Surprised that not surprised. I mean, I know there is a lot of controversy over the congestion charge, but the members opposite talking about voting against this item because of that. So, I mean, using the market economy to cause people's behaviour to change, it should be something that I would have thought that Conservative members would be in favour of. It's a way of adjusting behaviour, and it's a fact of life that we all live with money, and cars cost money, petrol costs money, parking costs money. A congestion charge would be another bit of money it's going to cost, but it's not like cars are free. Next point. So I think the main thing I just wanted to add, I'll skip that, so I'm talking a bit too much. The last point, I work at Addenbrooke's Hospital as a porter. I talk to people there about this congestion charge and other things. And there are, lots of those workers at Addenbrooke's and other hospitals, I guess, probably around the region, live in places like Haverhill, travel a long way. So it's A to B. They don't live in Cambridge, can't afford to. So getting to work could be an issue if it's driving. But just to give you one story from one person who I spoke to at length about the congestion charge, and his sort of basic final line was, I don't care about the congestion charge because I don't have a car. He can't afford to have a car. He uses the bus. So the bus is his life, his way of getting around. And I think that's the person that we need to be encouraging to travel more on buses in this region.
Thank you. So we've had a wide-ranging and important discussion. It comes on the back of the Combined Authority, rightly, in my view, ahead of the October dropping of routes by stagecoach, effectively making a statement that buses really matter. This report, with the input of the meeting on the 24th, and the likelihood that by then the report for the board, in terms of an outline report, will also be available, needs to help and link into choices that the Combined Authority's got about bus services. Personally, and I'm only one individual councillor, I think that we can't afford to have any further cuts to the rural bus network, because if, as Councillor Seresti rightly said, we will succeed when people other than those that have to use the buses use them, we have to have that system. So I do believe that the combined authority's got an essential role. I think that Stagecoach, who still are a vital part of the system and until recently ran a really good service, I think they still run good services in Peterborough because they've got the drivers, but there's still issues with it. But we have to also put the word reliability into the discussion because the services just haven't been reliable. So there will be this report. I do think the combined authority's got to recognise that buses are a lifeline. Just the number of villages, the number of links between the market towns. I mean, if we don't have that basic network, then people will, and I accept the point that people have to use their cars often in rural areas, but there is a real risk that everybody will only have the access of a car or borrowing one, and some people, as Councillor Smart said, can't do that. So rural for us, I think really does matter. Franchising is something that has to be discussed. It was interesting when I put this to Stagecoach, they're not against franchising. In the past, they would have said at point blank. But now that they're not the 90% operator of bus routes, they're not in the position to call the shots. And we're really benefiting from having a range of other bus providers. We'll clarify that issue on the road charging, but obviously East Cambridgeshire and other councils can put their views across. Councillor Shayla rightly said, well, why? What's the government doing? It's totally wrong that the government isn't funding 60% of the country and only providing funds for 40%. I understand, and people should look it out. Suffolk are just basically closing down their public transport section in their county council because there's no funds to actually use to make a difference. So I think it's really important, the points that have been made. It is, as someone said, I think it was your comment, Councillor Bovingdon, that this is basically a very generalist type document, and the consultation would then need to be linked to any consultation that the board starts in relation to bus service funding for 2023. Councillor Esty, do you want to come in? And then I'll ask for a couple of comments from Tim Bellamy before we go to the vote.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair. I also agree about franchising. It would give us real opportunities and an opportunity to look at things a bit different. Just one thing I just wanted to say is if we're going to go down the franchising route, what can we all also explore the possibility of having an Uber type partner? Because I think if we as a large county were to try and do a deal not just with Stagecoach and the other bus providers, but with other forms of transport which might achieve, particularly the places where you are probably only going to get one or two people in rural districts and stuff like that who need transport occasionally. I mean, it might be a real solution. It's not going to be a main solution, but it may be a solution for a bit of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It wasn't made earlier, and we're coming on to a report about that kind of a service in Huntingdon, in Ely, and in Wisbech. There are services that link up to local services, but it may well be that we have to look at a different model than a double-decker bus running down a village lane as part of the solution. And I know in Fenland, FACT has provided some of that service. So I think that's another element. And also the one point which I just also underline is integration, because in the past, Stagecoach kind of set the bar about what the ticket prices were and how the timetables worked. And now that we've got 5 or 7 different operators, including Vectair in Peterborough, I think it's in Stagecoach's interest to lead the way in integration. I think the issue is getting more people onto buses, and I think some of that integration through ticketing, knowing that the information is readily available, because as you said and others have said, how do the public know what service, when's the next bus going to turn up? And that information is way substandard at the moment. So there's a range of issues there. I'm going to propose. Sorry, you were going to come in, Tim, and then we'll go to the vote.
Yeah. Just I think there's a few things I just want to clarify. Firstly, thank you for your feedback and the continued engagement. I think that's been critical and a really good discussion this morning. On the integration point, I think we've got the through ticketing, the interoperability. It's a ticketing issue, but also it's a modal issue. So making sure that active travel, so the first and last mile, can link with buses as well, and that is a key part of the LTCP. So that's the overarching document, strategic document to this, and the bus strategy is one of the modes that's underpinned that. So we need to bring that out both in the emerging local transport and connectivity plan, but also in the bus strategy. I think we've had criticism previously around not being ambitious enough, and that was that's the perception around our previous BSIP submission. But actually, double impact initiative, I think that's a significant step forward. That is ambitious, and it will be difficult. It will be hard to achieve, but I think this is a step in the right direction. With regard to the franchising position, I know that members of this committee should be in receipt of an informal briefing note on franchising. If not, let me know around that, and there will be a discussion in a subsequent committee around where we're going on franchising.
If there is a note, if that could be shared to all members of the Transport Committee.
And finally, on the BSIP, that is where the detail will emerge. So you've got this is a strategic document, and we will take on board all comments, and they'll be reflected. But the BSIP will also provide some of that detail level as well.
The implementation plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So as I said, certainly from my part, I regard buses as a lifeline to a lot of communities. So this whole strategy really matters. I'm going to move from the chair. Do I have a seconder for the strategy based on also adding the further points that people have raised? Councillor MacDonald, second that. Can I see all those in? I think basically all of the vote here requires a 2/3 vote. So can I see all of those in favour of the bus strategy and taking it forward to the board? That is 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against? And I presume you're abstaining? Okay, thank you. So it has the 2/3 majority, and therefore it'll be taken forward. But I do urge councillors to attend. What time on the 24th is it?
11:30 to 12:30.
So 11:30 to 12:30 on the 24th, and if you can't make it, if someone from each council can make that, along with a council officer, if you want to bring input along, okay?
That'll be here, Chair, will it?
No, it'll be online.
Online, that's fine. Thank you.
So there's an online discussion on the 24th, and then the leaders will be meeting on the 30th. So we're effectively recommending this along with the improvement plan and the discussion about what the role of the combined authority is in protecting services next year. So the leaders will have a full discussion on the 30th. Okay. So thank you for your input. I think it was really important that we gave time to that item. I took them all together there. Okay, so I assume you accept that we take a vote on all three together. Okay, thank you. So the next item is the Ting. Yeah. So are you going to introduce this, or there's going to be two parts to it?
Be two parts.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Introducing item 2.5.
Just before Oliver Harris comes and joins us to update regarding the Ting, I just want to take through. Sorry, before I pass over to Oliver to take us through the finding the market research in the Ting. and a subsequent request to go out to retender service, there's an important issue that I need to raise with the committee. And this includes a breach of process in relation to the extension of the demand responsive transport, which is a TING service. In light of the breach in process, Gordon Mitchell, our Chief Executive, has instigated an internal investigation into the matter. This breach specifically relates to an absence of appropriate authorisation. This should not have happened and has been taken seriously. On conclusion of this internal investigation, improvement measures will be instigated and a summary will be provided to members. However, this should not detract from the positive impact that TING has had on the residents of West Huntingdonshire, and Oliver Harris will take us through that. Is that okay, Chair?
Okay. Oliver, if you could come to the mic.
Right then. Let's see. TING is a demand responsive transport service. It is effectively Uber for buses. And if you think it in those terms, Uber requires you to have a smartphone. What we have got here is a system whereby you don't need a smartphone. You can also simply dial into the call centre and have your journeys logged onto the system. So it is intended to get around some of those issues. It has been successful in actually carrying more passengers. We've not noted any loss of passengers on the existing bus services in the area served, which is, if I describe an area from Huntingdon down to Cambourne, across to St Neots, up to Thrapston, up to Sawtry, and back down to Huntingdon. Within that area of 360 square kilometres, people now have the ability to book a bus service from anywhere to anywhere. The cost is low, £2 single, and it covers off a lot of the rural needs which have been expressed by councillors here. In terms of market research, we can see that 41% of people travelling on TING are under the age of 34, in the 16 to 34 category, so 41% there. That compares with 17% on the conventional bus services operating in the same area. And that suggests that we've got significant growth and modal shift, because we're moving those people either from not travelling at all, or in some cases using mum and dad's taxi or car sharing, back into using the bus to get around. Commuting to work on conventional bus services in the area, 9% of journeys are commuting to work, 27% using the TING. So there are actually significant differences between the travel pattern of this demand responsive service and other services. There have been questions about whether it's value for money. The way we assess value for money is in terms of cost per passenger carried. And if you think we have 46 services that are supported by us, and we look at the cost to us per passenger, we sort them in order of which requires the least support money to which requires the most. Then if the least is number 1 out of 46 and the most expensive is 46 out of 46, TING is 30th out of 46. So it's not out of line with the main body of the bus services. So the TING service is created to match with our vision for bus and the emerging bus strategy. That concludes my note for you.
Thank you, Mr. Howarth. There are effectively two parts to this report. One is to give an update on what is a demand responsive trial. And second, there's this issue of retrospectively authorising the expenditure, albeit that members, particularly the board, knew that this was going to be done. I think we've also got a variation to the recommendation. I don't know who's best to actually clarify that, because there's a change to recommendation B, and it's important that members understand the minor change to the wording, because I think, yeah, and that also so effectively what we're the variation, which I think it would be really useful if you could explain, because I think I'm the only person who's got it, is that that we're actually only really seeking approval for the funding for next year, and that there will be a further report to the seeking approval from the board for the following 2 years.
Yes.
So if you could just explain that
So,
before I invite people to make wider contributions. Thanks.
Yep. So the suggested change into the wording suggested in recommendation B is that
A stays the same.
Yeah,
A
A
stays the same.
Yeah, A is the same.
And B is split into 2 bits.
Yeah. So the revised wording for B is retrospectively authorise year 1 of the tender and award for a new Ting DRT bus service contract in West Huntingdonshire starting on the 27th of November 2022. So that bit's relatively the same. Then this is a bit where the change kicks in. The potential term of the contract is 3 years, 1 year with an option to extend for 1 year plus 1 year at a cost of £424,950 per annum. So we are looking at a 1 year commitment in this board, and subsequently, as Councillor Herbert outlined, we'll be coming back to seek the extension for year 2 and 3, and then there will be an additional recommendation which you see, which is to note that officers will seek approval for funding for extension for year 2 and 3 from the Combined Authority Board, and before that will come to this committee for discussion.
Are you clear enough about that change? So effectively, the wording of B is marginally altered, and there's a separate C which says that years 2 and 3 still got to be voted on. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any comments or questions? Councillor MacDonald, and then Councillor Bovingdon.
Thanks. I mean, it's going into the discussion. The biggest question I had was what was the comparative cost. So you've answered that in the paper, and that's really encouraging. I mean, seeing the numbers of 30,000 is quite remarkable. And it's the kind of innovation I think that we're looking for potentially across the county. So I think the amended recommendations is good. That was also, it seemed to be slightly a blank check in the original recommendation. So I'm much happier that we have the, if I call it the 1+2 recommendation in C, and yeah, let's see where this takes us and what lessons we could learn to apply elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Bovingdon, and then Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. A question from Anna Bailey, actually, is that in the board pack, I think we were told that the cost per passenger was £17. This is now saying 14. What's the correct figure?
I believe it's 14, but it varies from month to month as the figures go on. So September had quite a low passenger number because for a week everyone was at home watching the television with the Queen's funeral and things like that sort of, and so there's a dip in the number of people conveyed at that stage. But it's certainly in that area between 14 and 17.
So this is effectively an average?
Yeah.
Thank you. And second question was really around the decision to fund this route when 10,400 was not forthcoming for the Ely Zipper service, which actually carries 22,000 passengers a year. Just if somebody could answer why the 10,400 wasn't paid for that, and we're paying potentially 400,000 for this one.
Ely Zipper, I think we're funding it until next year, and then we've got to make a further decision.
Yeah, we're funding Ely Zipper. It was part of the agreement that went to board in a previous meeting.
It's not demand responsive, but if you look at the routes that Stagecoach dropped, they include quite a lot of the little routes around St Ives and Huntingdon. Yeah, I mean, there's a commitment to the Ely Zipper and also to the Wisbeach bus, and I would expect that subject to funding will be given the equal airing as any other decision about the post-Stagecoach routes. Yeah. Right. Councillor Wakeford, and then Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose perhaps obviously representing Huntingdonshire District Council, I am very supportive of extending the service, but very much as well as, not instead of, similar, more innovative approaches to filling in the gaps where conventional larger buses can't fill right across the Combined Authority area. So I think the clarification from the chair there and from Tim as well was very important on that point. I think the paper makes a compelling case for the value of extending this. There's the I think entirely fair summary in 210 that from the stats you've got, it would have been very disadvantageous to passengers not to have extended this. I concur with that. I think, as was highlighted in presentation, the fact that we're capturing a different demographic, which links to Councillor Threst's comments earlier about buses as well, is valuable in all sorts of wider ways than we're measuring. And I think it paints a positive picture as it is. But a suggestion made by our Huntingdonshire representative, my sub-colleague, Councillor Davenport-Ray, at the previous meeting, I would echo now that particularly in qualitative feedback, which you've clearly got from the description of the survey results, it's not just people ticking some figures, but 2.7 describes face-to-face interviews and so on. I suppose it feels a shame and a missed opportunity to me that from what's reported here, at least, it doesn't sound like we've picked up what anecdotally we perceive to be hugely valuable, which is that this is, as the chair highlighted, providing a service to people who haven't otherwise got an alternative. So I think the kind of cost per journey figure is as it were, a more valuable spend where it's supporting a journey where people have so few other options compared to in other contexts. And I appreciate the Combined Authority's value for money assessment doesn't have a metric that easily captures that, and I can't see an obvious easy way of doing so. But I think in future survey work, as I say, was suggested at the last meeting a few months ago, I'd reiterate if we could specifically seek to capture data around the existence or absence of alternative transport modes for the people using the journeys. I think that would really add to the richness of our grasp of the value which, as a Huntingdonshire councillor, we absolutely think this is providing already. But as I say, the report stands with the data presented in it, and I would urge colleagues to support it on the basis acknowledged.
Thank you for that view from Huntingdonshire. I'll take Councillor Seaton and then Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chair. Just actually backing up what Councillor MacDonald said earlier, and that is that hopefully this could be rolled out to other areas within the Combined Authority. And I'm sure Oliver will perhaps remember that when this was first brought to the committee some year ago, that I was asking the question, well, why can't we have a similar operation in Fenland or in other rural areas? And quite rightly, I was told, well, this is an experiment. And we will review it after a certain period of time to see how it's working, and it's working well. So I would hope that we may see this rolled out to other areas within the Combined Authority area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Just wondered how you got the data in terms of the marketing. Were you asking people to fill in forms, or was it online, or did you do focus groups, or did you talk to people on buses? Was it a conversation? A few questions, I don't know if that's okay, Chair. So that's one thing. And just with regard to the data, especially with the overwhelming data saying that Ting passengers liked Ting travel and conventional travel passengers would like to travel on Ting, respectively 94% and 80%. Did you ask people why they made that decision, why they were in favour? And was it because the Ting travel was so much cheaper than a conventional bus service? If so, then that's a factor that needs to be taken into account, I guess, in terms of analysing that data, because obviously it was costing £14.35 per trip. And I don't know if that allows for the £2, charge, so it's actually £16.35. That's one thing. So can a Ting sort of develop potentially into a service if there's a lot of demand on a particular section of routes, or vice versa? And I think that's the last thing I wanted to say. Yeah, I wanted the last thing. So that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Oliver?
Let's see, there are two different sorts of survey done because clearly the Ting service, lots of people are using the app, and it's very easy to sample quite a lot of people using an app. And just asking questions, please answer these. So that the Ting was done on that basis. Very much harder to actually survey conventional bus passengers. And what we did was we put somebody with a pile of paper forms and pens on the buses for a couple of days, so that we actually collected information in. So we tried to make it as comparable as we could. And I'm now forgetting what your follow-up question was, I'm afraid.
Well, the data is there, but it's interpreting the data, I think. So I suppose the crux of my question was if passengers are preferring the Ting because it's so much cheaper than a conventional bus travel, because it's subsidised basically, then that needs to be taken into account in terms of saying whether the Ting is a good thing, a bad thing, or could be a better thing.
I think that there is also the issue that we're carrying more passengers, and yes, the single fare is £2. The fare coming back, there is no discount for returns, so it's £4 for return trip. So it's not necessarily significantly cheaper than the other bus fares. And I know you had another question as well.
So I just wondered whether the Ting, it must be that people want to travel in roughly similar sort of directions. I imagine it's not all random. And could the Ting be a part of a structure where a number of Ting travel plans by individual people become a route, or vice versa? If a route is failing, wouldn't want that obviously, but if it was, it could become something that's available to Ting travel. So to fit it into the system is what I'm saying. It's rather than a standalone thing.
Indeed. One of the things which we can do, we haven't yet tried, but we're talking with Vectair to do this, is look at whether existing services which carry people in on a market day in a significant flow to actually make that part of the Ting service and thereby, yes, bring them in and actually register a journey or part journey, which would assist assimilation into a single route at a later date.
Thank you. One last point from, could I just take Councillor Shaler and then I'll ask you to sum up. Councillor Shaler.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. I was at a passenger transport conference and they looked at these sort of services being trialled in different parts of the country. And I would ask that we see this as an experiment. It obviously has implications for the future. Different vehicles, as the Chair mentioned before, in different places, in rural areas, autonomous vehicles and things in the future. So asking for it to make money at this point, it misses the point. And I think we should make available as much data as you have, given that it is an experiment. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim.
There's just one area that I just wanted to touch base on regard an outline to the committee was around the surveys. So I think that they set a baseline this year. We'll need to continue to monitor that in next year as we go forward. So we would and then therefore look at monitoring and how things change over time, and how we can do things better. And also any reflections that members have around what additional questions or that they would like to see answered, we can then build that into the survey going forward. So I think that it sets a baseline, but actually data set can obviously be enriched by more and more the right question without actually getting to people that they need to be pitched at the right level so that people don't get bored of the question. But actually, we need to collect those the data that members want to see a response from, and we can reflect on that next year.
Thank you. So we've had a discussion both about demand responsive and also about the nature of the confirmation that this is. The Chief Executive is also undertaking a review just because we do need to get decision processes right, and this was a rare example where it wasn't all was done with good intentions, but the precise procedures weren't always followed. So can I have a proposer for this report, and then I'll seek a seconder. Proposed from Councillor Wakeford and seconded by Councillor Shaler. It's a 2/3 majority vote. Can I see all those in favour of the revised recommendations? Thank you, and that's unanimous. So we come on to the last substantive item, which is item 2.6, and it's a review of the spend on the Transforming Cities Fund. So if I can ask Tim to introduce this one, please.
Thanks again, members. So the Transforming Cities Fund is a capital grant fund aimed at driving up productivity through investment in public and sustainable transport infrastructure in some of the country's largest city regions. This covers the whole of our region and not just confined to our cities. The total budget for Transforming City Fund in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is 95 million, and following a thorough review and robust challenge of our programme, there's an expected underspend of 3 million. Since I came into post, we have been doing a lot of work with building confidence in the Department of Transport around the deliverability of the Transforming City Fund and getting our programme into a shape that is deliverable. The DFT have asked for the programme update, and this has been provided within the appendix, and subsequently we provided a reprofiled cost forecast and a RAG status around our what we believe is the deliverability of the programme. That I firmly believe that the Combined Authority now has a realistic and deliverable programme, and we await the funding from central government. In addition, outlined in the paper, there are a number of smaller capital replacement schemes that have been robustly assessed to ensure alignment with the TCF objectives and ensuring that they're deliverable. An agreement is sought from this committee to agree that these are right to be included in the revised programme, and these are detailed on page 533. However, I do need to inform the committee that this paper and the associated recommendation need to be set in the context of the government autumn statement that is due tomorrow, and any updates received in relation to the TCF budget and other transport fund will be outlined to TIC members and leaders at the earliest convenient when we learn information tomorrow. At the present time, there remains no feedback from government either way as to whether this fund will be continuing. However, the confidence we built with the Department of Transport, I'm hoping that they see that these are deliverable and are ready to go going forward. This is reflected in recommendation B that asks the committee to agree the recommended capital replacement scheme for the programme for seeker approval at the Combined Authority Board and central government, whilst recommendation C seek delegation to myself and the chair of the Transport Infrastructure Committee to inform the Department of Transport of the revised programme with the expectation that the fund will be allocated in full. I commend this report to the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Seresti.
Chair, at the end of the report, there is a possibility that some of the money is going to be used for the Centre for Green Technology in Peterborough, and I'm assuming the application has been made by Inspire Education. I'm a board member, so I'm obviously declaring an interest, and I'm just saying, should I vote? Should I not vote? I don't know what the rules are. I'm sorry. I don't know what the rules are here. I do know what the rules are.
Well, I don't think, given the nature of the overall report, that you've got an interest that prevents you from voting.
Okay,
that's
great.
my view.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not a lawyer, but
Oh, no,
that's,
well,
I don't see a reason
better
why
to
you
be
shouldn't
safe.
vote, Councillor Sresti. Thank you for declaring that interest. Any other comments on the report? Councillor MacDonald.
It was just, Chair, to ask the question around Soham station. Obviously, it's an enormous part of the historic spend. I was there on the day it was opened. It's always great to see a new station opened. Not for this meeting, maybe for a future meeting. I'd like somewhere to see the passenger statistics for Soham. I saw one or two comment. You have to measure these things over, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. I'm not really thinking about a snapshot, but it's a very significant expenditure. Cambridge South Station that is there, which is much smaller, although a lot of that funding is coming from National Rail, is going to eventually process in excess of 20,000 passengers. It's felt. So perhaps leave it to Tim to come back at some stage. It's not desperately urgent. I would like to understand the usage at Soham and what it's delivering. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Smart?
I mean, so the underspend is just over three. Sorry, the
Could you speak up a little bit or be
the
nearer the mic?
underspend is just over 3%. Doesn't seem too bad, but is there any plan to get rid of that, not have an underspend?
Well, deliverability is definitely there. Could you also just comment on what the deadline is to spend this funding as well? Because some of this, we're getting closer to the deadline.
So picking up your point, Councillor Herbert, around the spend, we need to get a spade in the ground by March of this financial year, and subsequently the spend need to be spent by the following March. So we got until 2024 to get that delivered, and that's why when we did the capital replacement list of capital replacement schemes, we did a deliverability assessment. So there were some schemes that we would wanted to progress, but actually they weren't deliverable in the timeframes. Therefore, because we need to be able to deliver within the next 15 months, and the underspend is. The underspend itself is relatively small. When we started the programme, the expectation was that underspend was going to be significantly greater than that. But having the transport team has robustly gone through some of our due processes, looking at our programme management, and actually go back to some of the things that we were discussing earlier in the meeting around having the right processes in place, liaising with our partners, so that, especially with county and county and city colleagues around some of the on the highway side for some of these schemes, and having the robust process in place and the right contractors ready to go. So we have done all we can to make sure that this is a robust programme and is realistic and deliverable. And it now, if we get agreement at this committee and then subsequently at board, then we need to go to government to request that funding.
Councillor Shayler and Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. I would. Is this on? Hello. Yes, a little bit of clarity. I understand it's 5.5 million worth of schemes, and 3 million of that is from the underspend, and the 2.5 is from gain share. I understand. I want to know what these are dependent on. There seems to be some, what part of it is solid, what is not really. The other one was, originally we were looking at 500,000 for the Mill Road scheme, and that again, it's from March to March. So these are things that are ready to go now. But that included the public realm design, as I understand. But I see in the paper it's only 150,000 now. That's because of the change in overall funding level. Yeah. Even though that scheme scores incredibly high, it ticks all the boxes basically. So a comment on that would be helpful. Thank you.
So regarding your second point is, yes, there are a number of schemes that were scored incredibly high. We did have a budget that was a constrained budget, and that's why it's one of those that was on the periphery and didn't the whole scheme, and that's why and these were progressed with county colleagues and city colleagues and making sure that we're happy with the revised programme and it was deliverable. And in relation to specifically which scheme, could you just clarify your first question around which scheme you were talking about around the gain share and the funding?
Yes, so it's, Chair, 5.5 million, I understand, is the total, but that is two parts. So, yeah.
So just regarding that, is that linked back to the King Dyke around where the money could come from game share, and actually the expenditure is guaranteed within the King Dyke budget, but actually there is potential to move some of that into from game share if required. So it's a £3 million underspend. Which we are consuming, and an extra 2 million that we can move from gain share because King Dyke within the budget that we've allocated at this stage.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Seaton?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, it's not for this meeting, but I wonder whether Tim perhaps could give an update online or whatever on the A47 dualling proposal. Thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, if there are other issues that people want to raise, then do email Tim. There's some really important unlocking projects here, often linked to jobs and homes in new locations, as well as a range of projects that have been successfully delivered. We won't be praying, but we'll be hoping that tomorrow confirms that this overall pot is available. And it was one of those pots where, because we were a combined authority, we got the money and other areas of the country didn't get it. And that matters, including on things like the electric bus funding, which this 1.9 million is a small part of a much bigger sum. And we hope that Peterborough also gets electric buses as well. So, can I ask for a proposer? Oh, sorry, Councillor Wakeford, how incompetent was it for me to overlook your wish to ask or make a point?
Not at all. Thank you, Chair. No, and at risk of sounding a touch parochial, obviously there's reference to the very important A141 and St Ives project in the existing project table in the middle of paragraphs 213. Obviously, it's disappointing that in the replacement projects there doesn't appear to be one from Hunts. However, I'm cognizant of the timescales, as we've just touched on, around speed of delivery required to make use of this money, and I look forward to us benefiting from the couple of county-wide measures that are included in the replacement projects. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I think if you and others take a keen interest in those projects that are still to be completed, that might actually help. But as Tim Bellamy said, we need to get the principles final by this coming March, and then we have to spend it. So there may still be some variations just based on deliverability, because we prefer not to give any of it back. Okay. So I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder. We don't need to vote on A because it's just to note. Thank you, Councillor Bovingdon. And a seconder? And if I take Councillor MacDonald, and so I put all three B, C, D to the vote, and it's a 2/3 majority. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Well, thank you for all your contributions, and I thank the members of the public who are still watching. It really does matter that we add and win more funding, including this focus on buses. So there's the event on the 24th, engaging with each of the councils, and you will also benefit from looking out the agenda for the board, because that will bring forward the reports that will also be looking at the options for funding bus services in 2024. So thank you for all your contributions. I won't be chair at the next meeting, but you will have a chair on the 18th of January. We wish Nick a speedy recovery from his operation today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thank you.